Osiyo. It's how we say hello in Cherokee. In this episode, we'll learn about the traditional Cherokee pastime called marbles and how hard hits and heckling are all part of the fun. Plus, we'll grind stone with sculptor Eddie Morrison, whose work is sought after across the country. But first, New York Times best-selling author Daniel H. Wilson. He's a self-proclaimed robotics nerd who's turned his passion into a writing career and has some film projects in the works with some pretty impressive producers.
When I was a kid, I was really into science fiction. I spent a lot of time with my head buried in a book. For me, it was a way just to kind of like get out of whatever situation I was in and go someplace else. I'm Daniel H. Wilson, and I'm a writer. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I grew up in North Tulsa, Harvard and Pine, down the street from my grandma. And my dad ran a body shop, Howard's Auto Top and Body Shop on North Peoria. I managed to get into Carnegie Mellon, the Robotics Institute. Ultimately, it was 2 master's degrees and a PhD in robotics. And as I got through graduate school, I started writing papers, obviously, to go present, my research and everything. And so I started realizing that's where my strengths were at. And then I had this really silly idea for a book called How to Survive a Robot Uprising. What if I just took science fiction totally seriously and said, well, fine, let's ask roboticists, how do you escape from each type of robot, each type of scenario? And then I transitioned into writing novels. I wrote a book called Robopocalypse, Amped, and a novel called Robogenesis, which is the sequel to Robopocalypse. This is pretty cool. I mean, from the graphic novel that I wrote, Quarantine Zone, the artist sent me some of the original work, and it's also one of the most fun parts of writing a comic or a graphic novel is, I just wrote a couple of words. A boy stands in a doorway, and then he creates a work of art. Here's my 3 novels that I've written so far, Amped and Robopocalypse and Robogenesis, and then short story, all my DC, Earth 2, World's End stuff. Then all the nonfiction, Mad Scientist Hall of Fame, How to Build a Robot Army, How to Survive a Robot Uprising, my good old brojitsu, including this classic photo of me pulling my little brother's hair, just to show my brojitsu bona fides. And then, a lot of short stories that have been in anthologies. Yeah, it's kind of piling up.
Checkmate. Ultimately protecting what is most precious to them.
The Nostalgist is a short story that I actually was inspired by The Old Man and the Sea, the old Hemingway. My vision was of a world where the real world, the gritty real world, was not a place where you'd want to live, a scary place. But if you put on these things called eyes, which just look like glasses, and ears, which look like a hearing aid, then you can have your experience of the world sanitized, sort of like a skin put over the world, so you see the world that you want to live in. I got this call from a director. His name's Giacomo Cimini. He wants to make a short film out of this story that I wrote. I bought a ticket. I went out to London where they were shooting this, and the second I arrived, it just blew me away. Seeing the film process firsthand also made me understand the difference between writing novels and writing feature scripts. Robopocalypse had sort of a charmed life, for sure. What happened with us was DreamWorks called and said, we want to buy the rights to Robopocalypse today. We hadn't sold the book yet. We had to sell it that day, because it was one of those offers where you either take it or leave it. And my lawyer, I remember, she was very happy. She goes, I think it's Spielberg. 1 week later, I visited Amblin, which is the production company there, and I met Steven Spielberg, and we talked about robots, and it was a really amazing experience because he was involved with Robopocalypse before anybody, really, before anybody had bought it. So I had that conversation while I was still writing the book. I've learned a lot in the last 5 years about Hollywood and setting my expectations. Having that come so close to going into production and then stall out, kind of like was a good growing experience for me. I kind of realized, everything doesn't always go your way, and when it does, you better be grateful for it because, I've had a lot of really good luck. So I'm just grateful every day I get to keep writing books and not have to get what I consider a real job. When Robopocalypse came out, and I had some interview and somebody said, yo, why all the Native American characters, I said, well, I grew up in Oklahoma, I'm a Cherokee citizen. You can't help but to put yourself into what you write. Yeah, part of my background is all of this nerdy robot stuff and math and science. But the other part of me is the kid who grew up in the Cherokee Nation and in Oklahoma. I mean, it's so much fun to realize that I wrote a best-selling book that is Indians and robots. And it's like, those are the two things that are important in my life. and people actually care enough to buy and read a novel about that, It's just kind of crazy to me.